This is a short narrated PowerPoint regarding assessment values based on the source Race, Brown and Smith 2005 entitled 500 Tips on Assessment. The intention of this PowerPoint is to position your thinking around the sort of values that sit behind assessment tasks when you're designing them for your units. When you're designing assessment, it should be firstly valid. The assessment that you're creating should assess what you're wanting to measure. So you need to make sure that when you create an assessment task, it is going to give you the information that you're wanting to find out from that assessment and not information that is nothing to do with what you're trying to measure. This seems like a fairly basic point, but it is often the case that assessments are not valid and that when you get the assessments to mark, you actually find it difficult to measure those assessments against the unit outcomes. So validity is extremely important as a starting point. Assessment should be reliable. By this we mean that if an assessment is reliable, it should be very clear to the students and to other markers what it is you're looking for in terms of an assessment outcome. And that if the assessment pieces are shared and they are reliable, you'll find that all of the people involved in the marking process will more or less come to the same agreement about standards and about the marks that should be awarded. If there's great disparity in the moderation or the marks that various internal or external markers arrive at, the assessment task itself may not be reliable and would need to be looked at beyond the actual performance of the students. Assessment should be transparent. It should be very clear to everyone, including and especially the students, what it is you're trying to assess. Students should not be playing the game of guess what's inside the assessor's head. It should be in line with the intended learning outcomes as published to the students, and it should make a clear link between those outcomes and the assessment criteria that are being used to mark the assessment piece. Assessment should be authentic. Firstly, we have to make sure that the achievement that is being created by the assessment piece actually belongs to that student. So we need to look at elements of academic integrity so that we can say for sure that the piece that you're marking is coming from that student and is not from another source. Secondly, it is really important that we're measuring students' achievement against the intended outcomes and that the outcomes are as close to the intentions of the curriculum design in the first place. So the constructive alignment will actually aid authenticity. Assessment should motivate students to learn. The assessment should help them to structure their learning continuously in their studies and not just give them a shot in the arm a couple of weeks before an assessment piece is due. This is where the summative and formative assessment come together to ensure that the student's learning process is following a continuum and that the assessment pieces are a logical element in that along that continuum. Assessment should promote deep learning. So if you're going to set an assessment piece that takes up students' time, i.e. it's not just a spot quiz in class talking about whether they're recalling terminology from the day before or a quick review of last week's lesson. If it's a proper assessment piece on which people are spending time and effort, it should be really going towards much deeper learning and the application of knowledge and skills as they've been going along in their unit. Assessment should be fair. There should be an equal opportunity for students to succeed in a unit and in an assessment piece, even if those students' experiences are not identical. This is particularly true where we're assessing work based on individual learning contracts. So if, for example, you have students with special consideration, you've got to make sure that you maintain fairness across that whole cohort. It's also really important that the assessment is seen to be fair. So students' perspective on fairness is really important, and as a lecturer you should be prepared to speak to students individually or as a group and to reassure them about the fairness of the process, and the process should be as transparent as possible, as we said before. Assessment should be equitable. This means that even though assessment overall may be designed to discriminate between students on the basis of their ability, the assessment practices should not be discriminating against different groups of students. So that's to say that an assessment piece should never disadvantage a particular group of students within that cohort. So you should try to give everyone an equal opportunity of success and give students the support they need to succeed. Assessment should be formative, even if the assessment piece is designed to be summative. So in giving a grade back to a student or just a bare mark, it doesn't really inform the student very much about what they've done that's good or bad or indifferent in that particular assessment piece, and what they can do to improve on their performance in the future. You should take every opportunity that you can to give feedback to students that builds their capacity to perform more effectively in the future, and that goes beyond grades and marks and words of praise, or you could have done better, or you did great this time, or this is an excellent piece of work. Formative feedback should actually be about performance and what students can do to improve, and this should be given as early and as often as possible. Assessment should be timely. Assessment shouldn't occur at the end or only at the end of a long unit. It should be dotted throughout the unit so that students have ample opportunity to avoid the sudden death syndrome, where all of the assessment marks are in one basket, as it were. Timely assessment is provided so that it's part of the learning continuum and provides feedback to students so that they can practice their skills before they're put in a situation where those skills are being assessed. Assessment should be incremental where possible. This means that if there is a large assessment piece, students should be able to break that down into smaller bite-sized chunks and to have those smaller chunks assessed along the way so that they can get incremental feedback in the build-up to a large assessment piece that's worth a lot of marks. In ED 6112, we're doing this with our Assessment 4 piece, where every week you're adding to your reflective journal, and this journal incrementally creates your assessment piece 4, which will be marked at the end of the unit. So this is a prime example of incremental assessment. Assessment should be redeemable. This is not always possible, but where possible, it's a great idea to let students retake assessment pieces so that they can improve their score and so that they can learn from the feedback that they've been given. This might be done in terms of giving actual marks and then having those marks redeemed by a subsequent submission, or it could be done by allowing students to hand in a draft or do a preliminary performance of the accessible material and then allowing feedback to come to bear before the students are marked finally on that piece. Assessment should be demanding. This is to say that assessment pieces should not be so easy that students can just waltz through them. They should actually be an opportunity for excellent students to really show how good they are and for ensuring quality assurance and the actual professional ability of students and to the degree to which they're meeting those standards through the assessments that they're doing. Assessment should be efficient and manageable. There are lots of different assessment systems and they might be brilliant at assessing students, but it's really important that they are kept manageable because of staff time and resources. The burden on staff through assessment pieces should not be excessive, and nor should the demands on students undertaking the assessment pieces. In some cases, it might be a good idea for staff to try out the assessments that they're asking students to do before giving them to students, just to gauge how much time they're going to take and what sort of resources students are going to need to complete the tasks required, and to really think about and check whether students are being asked to do something that's reasonable and manageable within the time frame given, and particularly at their level of study at that particular point. Finally, it's worth reiterating about formative assessment. Formative assessment can be given outside of actual assessment work, and even as a matter of course as the learning is proceeding in the class. Formative assessment is really, really important in terms of students doing well in their formal assessment pieces. So it should start as early as possible in a course and be given as frequently as is possible too. Finally, assessment should enable the demonstration of excellence. If you have excellent students in your classes, and we're sure that you do, assessment should enable them to really demonstrate their capacity for applying their knowledge and skills and meeting the standards of excellence required by the course. Your assessment pieces are a really important part of ensuring the quality of our units within the university and ensuring that students are meeting the graduate attributes as part of the constructive alignment of your unit with the course and with the intentions of the university.